There is no sound. No flash, you would notice. No shockwave for a fraction of a second, far above the clouds. The sky carries a faint, silent shimmer, and then it is gone. On the ground, the only sign is that everything electronic stops at once. Your phone, the lights, the car in your driveway, all of it, in the same single instant. A single nuclear weapon has been detonated high above the continent, far too high to cause blast or fallout on the ground. What it has done instead is release an electromagnetic pulse. This is scenario 0. Today, could you survive a high altitude nuclear EMP, a nuclear weapon detonated near the ground is a weapon of blast, heat, and fallout. But a nuclear weapon detonated very high in the atmosphere, tens to hundreds of kilometers up, behaves completely differently at that altitude. There is almost no air to carry a shockwave. Instead, the weapon's energy interacts with the upper atmosphere and the Earth's magnetic field. The result is a pulse of electromagnetic energy, an invisible wave that sweeps down over the entire region in the line of sight of the detonation. Here is what makes it a continent-scale event. The higher the detonation, the wider the line of sight, and the wider the area. The pulse can reach a single weapon. Detonated high enough above the center of a continent can place a meaningful fraction of that continent beneath its effect. But the honest framing starts here. An EMP does not hurt people directly. It is not a blast. It is not radiation at the ground. What it threatens is not your body. It is the electrical and electronic infrastructure that modern life depends on. The pulse from a high-altitude detonation is usually described in 3 components which arrive in sequence. The first component is extremely fast, a sharp, intense burst that rises in billionths of a second. It is this speed that makes it dangerous to modern electronics, sensitive circuits, microchips, and digital components can be damaged by a pulse that rises faster than their protections can react. The third component is the slow one, and it behaves much like the geomagnetic storm from a solar event. It induces currents in long electrical conductors, power lines, transmission systems, long cables, and those induced currents flow into the same vulnerable component. Every grid depends on the large, high-voltage transformer. This is why an EP and a solar superstorm are studied as cousins. Both can damage grid transformers across a vast area at once. Both can leave a continent-scale region without power. The key difference is the fast pulse. The MP also threatens small, modern electronics that a solar storm largely spares, but the honest framing matters here too. MP effects are not uniform. They depend on the weapon, the altitude, the geometry, and on how exposed. Each device is equipment that is off, disconnected, or shielded can survive. An EP is a serious threat to infrastructure, not a magic that erases every circuit on the continent. Hour 0. The pulse. For most people, the first sign is the silence, the simultaneous, total stop of everything electronic. Many modern vehicles, which rely on electronic engine controls, coast to a halt. Traffic stops where it stands. Hour 6. The grid is the central failure. If enough high-voltage transformers are damaged, the power does not come back. With the flip of a switch, it is out across the affected region. And, as on the Channel's solar storm scenario, Those transformers are custom-built, heavy, and slow to replace. Hour 12. The familiar cascade begins, the same one that follows any grid-down event. Refrigeration warms. Fuel pumps, which run on grid power, cannot pump. Card payments fail. ATMs are dark. And cash on hand becomes the only currency that works. Hour 24. Communication is fractured. Cell networks depend on grid power and on electronics that may be damaged. Backup batteries at the towers last only hours. The most resilient medium, once again, is broadcast radio, especially older, simpler receivers that survived the pulse. Hour 72. The supermarket shelves are emptying. The just-in-time supply chain runs on 3 days of inventory, and it depends on grid power and on diesel pumped through grid-powered stations. Across the affected region, replenishment has slowed to a halt. An EMP is unusual among the channel scenarios. Nothing is broken that you can see. No building has fallen. No water is rising. The harm is entirely in the unseen layer, the electricity and electronics that the modern world quietly runs on. Day 2. Water becomes the priority. Municipal water depends on electric pumps. Most cities hold only hours to a couple of days of pressure in the system. After that, taps run dry and sewage stops moving. The same failure seen in every grid-down scenario. Day 4. The vulnerable are most at risk. People who depend on grid-powered medical equipment, home oxygen, refrigerated medication, powered devices, face the same danger described in the Channel's Solar Storm episode. In any extended grid-down event, this is where the first serious harm appears. Day 7. By the end of the first week, the affected region has settled into the hard reality of a long grid-down event. Emergency services run on dwindling fuel. Aid from unaffected regions begins to move inward, but the affected area, for a continent-scale EMP, is enormous and help is spread thin. But here is the honest distinction. Unlike a hurricane or an earthquake, an EP leaves the physical world intact. The roads are clear. The buildings stand. The reservoirs are full. What is missing is the power to use them, and that, unlike rubble, is a problem that can, in principle, be rebuilt. This is the question. That decides everything. How long until the grid comes back? And the honest answer is the same one given for a solar superstorm. It depends entirely on how many large transformers were lost. In the optimistic case, much of the grid's hardware survives, protected by distance, by chance, or by the protections already built in. Where transformers survive, regional grids can begin black start procedures within days to weeks, restarting the system generator by generator. In the pessimistic case, enough large transformers fail at once that whole regions cannot restart. Replacements must be manufactured, and only a small number of facilities worldwide can build them, with lead times in a normal year of many months to years. In that case, full restoration of the affected region is measured in years. During that span, the affected region faces the same hard challenges as any long grid-down event: food distribution, water treatment, sanitation, and medical access, all under strain. The honest framing is that a severe EP is not a momentary disaster. It is a prolonged one, potentially one of the longest this channel covers, but unaffected regions remain a powerful asset. An EMP from a single weapon covers a large area, but not the whole world. The undamaged parts of the country and other nations retain their industry, their transformers, and their ability to help rebuild. So, the question this episode has promised to answer: could you survive a high-altitude EMP? The honest answer is the channel's grid-down answer, because an EMP for the individual is a grid-down event. Your survival depends on being able to live without the grid for a long time. First, the familiar Scenario 0 kit, and for an EMP, the long-duration version, water, 1 gallon per person per Dalton Y for 2 weeks or more, shelf-stable food, a battery or hand-crank-powered radio, flashlights with stored spare batteries, a manual can opener, a full first aid kit, a long supply of essential medication, and cash in small bills. Second, a detail specific to this scenario. Small, simple, non-essential electronics can be protected by storing them inside a sealed metal enclosure, a principle known for over a century, a backup radio, spare batteries, a basic flashlight kept in a closed metal container are far more likely to work afterward. This is the one preparation an MP asks for that other grid-down scenarios do not. Third, plan for mobility without modern electronics. Keep a paper map. Navigation apps will not work. Keep some fuel safely stored, because stations cannot pump and understand that an older, simpler vehicle is more likely to run than a new one, though honestly, most cars are far less vulnerable than rumor suggests. And the last thing, as always, is not a supply, it is community. An MP could mean a long time without the systems that normally connect us. In that world, the people on your street become your information network, your security, and your support. Knowing your neighbors before the lights go out is, one more time, the preparation that matters most. How likely is a high-altitude EMP attack? This is, like the engineered pandemic, a probability that does not come from nature. It depends on the decisions of states, and that makes it genuinely hard to quantify. What can be said honestly is this: a deliberate high-altitude EMP attack would be an extraordinary act, an unambiguous escalation by a nuclear-armed state. The same deterrence that has constrained the use of nuclear weapons for generations applies here. It is, in plain terms, an unlikely event, but here is why the scenario still earns its place. An EMP and a natural solar superstorm share most of their consequences, and a solar superstorm is not unlikely at all. So the honest framing is this: you may never see a hostile EMP, but by preparing for one, you prepare for the solar storm that the Sunday will eventually send on its own. The two scenarios ask for the same readiness. We do not run this channel to scare you. We run it because the most useful question a person can sit with periodically, calmly, without panic, is: what would I actually do? Not in theory, in the silence, after everything stops at once. If you found this scenario useful, subscribe to Scenario 0. We are going to spend a lot of time in the dark hypothetical, so that in the bright real you are slightly more ready than you were this morning. Yes, in closing, no cadence promise.